My name is Bob Halagan. I'm a Rotarian from Buffalo, Minnesota. I have served in many capacities as a Rotarian. I was from my club, I was international chair, foundation chair, community chair, president, past president. I've been an AG, a DG. I guess I'm a PDG now. I've also served as district legal counsel for District 5950, fundraising chair, and there's probably a few other things that I've forgotten about. The goal of today is to give you an opportunity to consider situations that you might encounter and how you would handle them. We're going to walk through probably 3 scenarios, 4 if we go quick, of conflicts that have actually happened to me in one capacity or another. So everything you're going to hear about today is a situation that I've actually dealt with in one of my various roles as a Rotarian. And what we want to do today is talk a little bit about resolving the issue, but what I'd really like to have you focus on is process. Um, Don Norton, who's helping me out today, and I talked a little bit and how important the issue of process is, because when you're in the middle of one of these situations, there's all kinds of things going on. There's emotions that are happening. You might be dealing with friends, or you might be dealing with people who don't like you, or there may be other things going on. And it's really important to be able to fall back on a process that you understand and you agree upon. The other thing that I would suggest as you consider these issues is to think that as president of your club, you are the leader of the club, but you're not the boss of the club. That at the end of the day, you have to lead your club to a resolution. If you try to impose it, you generally are going to have a less positive outcome than if you get everybody to buy into the process, even if they don't buy into the ultimate conclusion. As we begin, I just want to say to the presidents in this group, congratulations on becoming president. For me, Pets was the time when I became a Rotarian. Back in 2009, I believe, was when I was president of my club. And I had been a Rotarian for about 9 years, and kind of just one of those Rotarians that came to a club every day and did my part, but never really understood what Rotary was about. It wasn't until I came to Pets and I looked around and saw the other people I was sharing the room with, and the other people who were striving in the same direction as I was to make a difference in the world, that I realized what an incredible organization Rotary was, and what an incredible platform it is to do good in the world. So to you PEs in the room, congratulations. You're going to have a great ride, and it's a great experience. So we're going to start out with, and just jump right into what we're going to do is we're going to break everybody into groups. So like I said, we're going to have a series of scenarios. We're going to give you 10 minutes in group to talk about your scenario, and then we're going to bring you back in and give everybody a couple of minutes to talk about what the solution was or the process was that they engaged in. And then to hopefully move on to the next one. We'll leave it open for discussion. In each group, if you can, pick a leader who will kind of report on what the solution is, or what the process was that you discussed. And we weren't able to put the actual scenarios on a piece of paper we can get to, so I will post them in the chat room so you can go back and look. Liz, if you could put up number 4 to begin with. So here's the first scenario for you to consider. A longtime member of your club, Freddie, has been very active and he's well liked in the club, and he's an avid music buff who mains a website dedicated to upbeat music. No one in the club pays a lot of attention to Freddie's hobby, but you get a call from a local radio or a local reporter indicating that Freddie's website has a section devoted to heavy metal, racist music that advocates for the extermination of Jews and the return of slavery for blacks. The site's chat rooms are filled with racist dialogue. The reporter is planning to do an article on the website and wants a comment from the Rotary Club. How do you respond and what steps do you take? So we have like about 53 participants. Liz, why don't we do 10 per room? And
Okay.
let's break into the rooms and see what kind of discussion we have.
All righty.
All right, everybody, we're back together. We had a lively discussion. Group number one, do we have a representative for group number one?
I got it.
I should have known.
Hey, you'll be surprised. I didn't say anything. I just took notes.
All right. So tell me the discussion in your room.
Okay, so what we talked about is that this felt like a blindsided situation, that people might not have expected something like this from Freddie because he was well liked. So we talked about verifying the information first. If Freddie has any personal friends in the club, maybe talking to them to see if they can provide any insights, to talk to Freddie about it individually and just not to necessarily assume the worst right out of the gate. Then we talked about checking RI's site for policies, talking to the district governor or AG, because this could potentially reflect on the district, so they would probably want to know about it, and potentially talk to district legal counsel as well. And just that this is a situation that we're all trying to figure out, that being, how do you deal with social media and all of the modes of communication that are out there these days.
And if the reporter is correct and the member is unrepentant, what do you do?
We didn't talk about that. We probably, I would say we'd probably punt to the district or punt to RI. You know, for me, this was reminiscent of the situation that just happened in Seattle with the president of the Seattle Mariners made some racist comments when he was speaking to a Rotary club in Seattle, and Rotary didn't have anything to do with it, but their name and brand got drug into it.
Yeah. Anybody else from group one have any comments? If not, group number two. What was your?
I guess I've been designated as the reporter for group number two. I think the first thing, if we're contacted by the reporter, the first thing we want to do is to say to the reporter, these are not Rotary's values. But then we want to talk to the person and, you know, find out his motives, if this is what he really believes. And someone brought up the fact that maybe he just is a First Amendment rights person and feels that he should be able to, you know, promote the First Amendment rights of somebody. But yet we can't let this reflect on Rotary. And so, you know, it may be, if we cannot convince him that he should not, you know, propagate these views, it might be, we might have to lose a member, but it would be better to lose a member than to have some of these views be associated with Rotary. And as the First Amendment rights is, we're not taking away his First Amendment rights. He's willing to, he can do this as a member of as his First Amendment rights, but he cannot let that reflect on Rotary because that's not our policies. He still has the option of not being a member of Rotary and expressing these values. So anybody else want to chime in? Anything else?
First Amendment only applies to government action.
One of the reasons I included this scenario is because of the media issue as well. And I think, you know, especially in today's environment, you just never know when you're going to find yourself in a place where you have to comment to the media on somebody or something. So I do think it's really important that you think about the process of what you're going to do in your club if you get contacted by the media regarding any kind of a controversial issue.
Along
So
those lines, one other thing we talked about was that we shouldn't rely on the reporter to, assume that we're getting good information. We could say those are not Rotary values, and then that's true, but then we should go and check what's really going on.
absolutely. I'll confess I struggle with the concept of a Rotarian ever holding views that are, about the extermination of Jews and the enslavement of blacks and how that would ever be acceptable in a Rotary club. But that, you're right, it's a club decision. And the next scenario, we're going to talk a little bit about how you remove a member too.
As a follow-up to what you said about Rotarians thinking that, when our FBI agent was our president, and I think he probably had a good idea, good source on us, but he basically said that within Hamas perceived Rotary as a terrorist group, which I always found to be very interesting. But I won't let you take it before I get into trouble.
Group number 4. We didn't elect anybody in our group, but somebody from group number 4 want to speak up?
Well, I can speak up. I won't repeat everything because I think as group number 4, most of what we talked about was already covered. I think we did agree that even though the president would probably be the one to lead the charge in talking to this person, that they should not do it alone. There are lots of good reasons for that. And then I think we actually talked about them talking to that person and from a Rotary values and determining whether the club is the right place for them, if that's truly how they feel. Is that correct? Is that sort of what we decided for?
Yep. Use the 408 test
Yeah.
as, is this really good for you, the club, and, is it beneficial to everybody?
Yep.
Yeah. And then the media, we suggested a written statement saying this is not what we stand for. We're assuming this is all true. And like the other groups, we verify the information, talk with the person along with another officer, consult with board. But anyway, yeah, you're right on that. But we were strong. We felt that the person should resign. If this is true, I wouldn't put up with it. I'd just say, he has to resign. But I don't know how you officially do that. Yeah, that'd be good to learn.
Well, we're gonna talk about that in the next scenario. Group 5, I think we had 5 groups, right?
Yep, and I'm Michelle Seats with the End Human Trafficking Club, and I'm the Group 5 spokesperson. I would say everything that everyone else said is pretty much where we were. So number 1, communicate with your board, have somebody go up to the higher ups, the district governor, at least inform them what's going on and ask for any advice. Assume Freddie is unaware this is going on. So start with that as the conversation with Freddie, that best intentions are the assumption, and verify what's going on there. And then making a very strong statement that this does not speak for Rotary. It does not match the 4-way test. And then if he was unrepentant, ask him to resign or outright kick him out. Any comments from Group 5? Did I get all that right?
This is Jim Patton. I'm from Group 1. I just wanted to add something that hasn't been mentioned. In today's society, we don't have any idea what his mental health is. And I certainly wouldn't be capable of dealing with that. So let's include that in our analysis, or at least some of our approaches.
Oh, you're leading right into my next example, Jim. We only had 5 groups, right?
Yes.
Okay, so, and again, one takeaway you should all have on this is you go into being a PE, think about the media, think about who's going to be the spokesperson to the media and think about the process you will use with the media, because that can blindside you. And when you're in the moment, it can be a challenge. So the next one I believe is I need to find the number. When you pop that up,
Sorry.
number 2. Nope, number 2. Let's go to number 2. All right. So scenario number 2, George is a relatively new member of the club who is very awkward socially, especially with women. When he applied for membership, one woman raised a concern about George being overly attentive, but ultimately withdrew it and George became a member. Women in the club tend to avoid George because he is very awkward with them. Since he was the only one who volunteered, George is the PE for next year. However, while attending a district event, George makes some comments that are sexually graphic to a group of other PEs at his table, a number of whom are women. When confronted about the comments, he first denies making them and then engages in a bitter attack on the women at the table as the ones who were the problem. The report comes back to your club and a number of women on your board are furious. What do you do? Let's stay in the same groups. Okay, lots of meat in that scenario. Group number 1, tell us what you focused on.
I've got some notes. Does anybody else from group 1 want to summarize, or do you want me to do it?
You're doing great, Kim.
Okay, I'll just go ahead there. Okay, so one thing we said was, as to where it happened, if it had happened at a club event, the strong women and men in the club may have dealt with it right then and there. So, we thought it was kind of interesting that it happened at a district event. But as with the other scenario, verify what happened, talk to the people at the table, obviously get the district involved because it was at a district event, to just to make sure we understand what happened. Certainly accept the word of the women that felt harassed or otherwise uncomfortable because of the comments. We also talked about seeking a district resource that is trained to deal with conversations with somebody. I personally, because of what just happened in Atlanta, this was kind of triggering for me in terms of being very careful about how you handle it with this person, lest there be some tragic unintended consequences. And then, if George doesn't seem to really understand or apologize, which based on the scenario of his defensiveness and attacking the women might be the case, then, he needs to resign, or that's where we didn't know what the process was to remove a member, if it needs to be a board vote or a club vote. So there was some consensus to have him removed from the club. And then also, at the district level, should there be some kind of apology or reconciliation, again, with the people who were directly at the table, and hurt or harassed by this behavior.
Well, there's a whole bunch of issues that are kind of interior in this. The first one is, how do you deal with the conflict in testimony? He denies it, says he never said it. You've got a table full of people who will say what they're going to say and say, whatever he said. What's the process for resolving that? Who makes that decision to resolve who you're going to believe?
Well, he initially denies it, but in the scenario presented, he then proceeds to launch into a blatant attack where presumably there are enough people there witnessing that, did he really say it or not? I don't think is an issue in this situation.
It isn't, but it's just something for you to think about when because you may run into situations where there's just a different, one, it's a he said, she said kind of situation. And you're going to have to resolve that. And, there's no particular legal burden of proof, but it's, the burden, the standard I would use, it's more likely than not. So somewhere in your process, people are going to have to decide, we believe him, we believe everybody else. Okay. So that's just something to think about as you run into these issues, is to have a decision-making group who you're going to be able to trust to come to a conclusion. Second factor to think about, how much weight do you put on how the women in the club react to him independent of this? Independent of this situation, this particular situation, you have women in the club who are very, very uncomfortable. So what does that do to your decision-making process? How do you deal with that? Any thoughts? I'm still on group
Well-
one. Anybody else can jump in too.
Okay, I'm just, you're focusing on the end, and I think the real issue here is sensitive, being sensitive to the needs of the members, and harassment training, which is part of, I believe that at least a lot of Rotaries have harassment training. Yes, you can go right to the punishment phase, but I don't think that's the real issue here. I think the real issue is you need to set the boundaries and say, look, this is not appropriate behavior. You don't tell dirty jokes at a Rotary meeting, period. It's not, have some sexual harassment training. We've seen the same thing with our new youth protection program. I think I want to encourage all the new presidents coming in to at least devote one meeting to both our youth protection and our harassment training so that people understand the boundaries. If it continues after boundaries are set and people are educated, then we can get into the punishment phase, which I think people were focusing on. But I don't think I think we have an opportunity here, a learning opportunity. And the main issue on this is I don't think that the club or the person has had the proper training. I think the training's available. I think we need to make our boundaries clear, so that there's no ands, ifs, or buts. It's no he said, she said. A person will realize right away it is inappropriate to make these type of comments. Done.
Any response?
Well, I agree with that. I feel like because this wasn't just a normal member, it was a president or president-elect, I can't remember from the chat, but I feel like that escalates the severity of the situation a little bit, because now you have the person that is truly the representative and the face of the club. I feel like it would be a much less severe issue if you were just dealing with a member who made other people uncomfortable. But now you have, this is the leader of the club, and also that person is behaving badly, and in a derogatory fashion at, more public events. So I feel like there's, I do agree with everything that you're saying, but I feel like because he was a president, that it escalates the issue. It's just
it may escalate the issue, but you just downplayed it for all the other members. I think it's just as bad if a brand new member comes in and does this behavior. If he comes in and says something inappropriate to you, I don't care whether it's the president or a member or, a guest, we'd address, but we wouldn't expect that they'd have our training. But I think it's an opportunity. I think you need to nip this even before it happens. I think that is the big issue here. And not it's happened.
Let me
but
back
we
you
let
off
it
a little bit here, John, because
Yep.
and I'm going to go back to my last question.
Yeah.
What weight do you put on the fact that the women in your club who have dealt with him over a period of time won't sit next to him? Won't, their antenna are up, and they're telling you that we're really uncomfortable with this person. And maybe it goes back to Kim's comments as well. How much weight do you put on the fact that the women of your club don't feel comfortable with him as a member? And that's not directed just to you, John, but it is I can tell you it's a factor that was considered.
Well, one of the things I'd suggested was that women should actually talk to him about how that made them feel. I think this person actually needs some professional help, but instead of just saying, it's wrong, you're bad, say, how uncomfortable you made us feel. That might be a step in the process. Might not be the final one, but it might be one step in the process.
If I can, I would, John, I agree that we should take some time for our programs to talk about sexual harassment and the youth protection. I think we also have to keep in mind that these types of behaviors, sexual harassment, is also not acceptable outside of Rotary. And these behaviors, though that person has affected Rotarians and maybe female members of a club, and then outside of the club at a district level, they've probably very potentially affected other people outside of Rotary. So I don't think that we're going to solve this person's issues within Rotary. And that's not necessarily our job. I think we have to handle it at a club level and at a district level. I think we definitely need to keep in mind that this may just be behavior of this person, and decide then, given the 4-way test and maybe guidance from our leadership and our policies, as to whether or not this person is reflecting in a good representative of Rotary on any level.
I'd like to quote one of the men in our group, and I'm sorry, I don't remember which one it was, but the very first thing that was said in our discussion was, quote, sorry, why should a woman have to sit there and take that? And I think the only thing that jumped out at me about what John said was the use of the term, the punishment phase. I don't see this at all as a punishment action. I see it as a management of Rotary, the club, and the experience of people who are coming to Rotary.
I would agree with that very much. And I think especially for the men in Rotary, it's sometimes hard to recognize that we don't listen very well to the women of Rotary, particularly when it comes to how they are responding to treatment by men. We've gone quite a bit over. I haven't gotten even to group. Am I on group number 2 yet?
Yep, that was me.
All right.
You can go to the 3.
Group number 3. Any thoughts? Anything additional?
Well, we're in group number 3, and we had a pretty good open conversation about it. And on the one hand, somebody had a copy of the Rotary Constitution that talked about how to expel the member and the due process in that. But we decided that we would send, besides applying the 4-way test, we'd send a male and a female member to talk to the person. Then they would report it back to the board, and the board would take action. And that if we needed to expel the member, we would probably get somebody from the district to handle that, just to protect everybody within the process. And we also, so that's where we hit. I know we went over, and I don't want to talk because a lot of it's.
And I think that's a good point, Henry. And I just want to focus on that issue just a little bit in terms of expulsion of a member, is that most bylaws don't actually address that. Oftentimes they don't address that. And so just like dealing with the media is something for you to think about what you need to do if you need to ask a member to leave.
Yeah.
They don't want to. And what's the process that your club would provide for? Because it's really not a district level decision, it's a club decision. So the district can help you, but at the end of the day, it's the club that makes the decision as to who their members are and who isn't a member. So in this case, the board voted, the process we went through was for the board to appoint an investigator, who was me, reach a conclusion, and then make a decision. And the decision was to ask for this person's resignation. But again, the idea is really to think about what process you might use if you run into a situation where you need to ask a member to leave.
Bob, I would just like to mention that there is an RI, sexual harassment and discrimination policy. And there's also one specifically for District 5960, which is on the 5960 website. And it doesn't really vary too much, but it does give some specific guidelines in terms of that investigative process and so forth. So
I'm the one that referred to the Rotary Constitution. I just happen to have a notebook with it in front of me. And they also have in there a temporary suspension option, but it provides for, due process and a 2/3 vote in appeals and everything else. But I think you may need to make sure you do everything, according to the book. But the big thing about problems with harassment is you got to get rid of it, as soon as you find out about it, because it can't get any better and you don't want it to happen again.
One fact that came up in our club is that we had one participant whose club had a similar situation. And he had talked about how their club had some liability insurance, and just to make sure that we had insurance possibly to cover such a mess.
I'm a lawyer, so I don't think there's much of a potential liability issue unless you say things publicly that could lead to a defamation claim. So where you want to be very careful is in any public pronouncements. And another factor in this, and it really comes back to Kim's point, is I don't know that this was sexual harassment. It was more just severely inappropriate. He was talking about, he wasn't telling a joke, he wasn't harassing, he was just sexually explicit in his description of something. And for us, as we explored that, the feelings of the women in the club actually became primary. I mean, the behavior was bad. But what was worse was when we realized that we hadn't been listening to the women in our club who were saying, I don't want to sit at this guy's table. And if you think about that, is there any Rotarian, I mean, if that's the reaction to a fellow Rotarian, that's not educable, I don't think. But anyway, group, and I'm completely lost and we're almost done here. Group 4. Were you, Henry, were you group 4?
We were 3.
You're 3. Group's 4. Who's group 4? Do we have a group 4?
You were in group 4, Bob.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, I can't speak, Paula. So you voted.
Okay.
I don't have anything to add. I think
Yeah.
we've talked it through pretty clearly.
Yeah.
Paula, did you have something you wanted to throw in there?
I realized I was muted. I think we also were going to look at how this guy responded when he was talked to.
Yeah.
Was he remorseful? And I didn't realize, I mean, I know the scenario didn't really lean toward that, but still, I think that would be part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that was about the only thing we came up differently. Team.
Yeah. If this person apologized and whatnot, you'd
Yeah.
give him a chance, I think, but I don't know.
But definitely not to have him as the next president.
Correct.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I do have a question, and Bob, I'll be quick. You said not to speak publicly, but if the fellow left, what's something that you can really do with the club to get them more sensitively aware of what's appropriate and not appropriate? So perhaps there needs, as somebody said, some training, but I hate to say just training.
Is there a policy? Yeah.
Well, for one thing, I think clubs are like families, and the word spreads pretty quick, no matter what anybody's saying.
Yeah.
That oftentimes people are kind of going to know what's going on. And again, this really wasn't a sexual harassment issue. This was even though it kind of spun that way, it was more, this is someone who really makes women in our club uncomfortable. So how do we deal with that? And I think one thing we did is focus on getting more women in our club, just add to we need more women in our club, and to to have the leadership really sensitive to that issue. I think training absolutely is one tool that's in your, in your toolkit. And, not to pick on the guys, but it's up to guys to listen better. The reality is we probably never should have let them in. There were some signals to begin with that maybe this fellow wasn't a good Rotarian. So, I mean, I think it's all of that. I think it's all of that. But what's the key in my mind and is more women in Rotary. We just need more women in Rotary, period.
Should we get something in writing from on the club? Is there like a club policy manual, or should we?
Or sexual harassment?
Well, yeah, or yeah.
This is hostile work environment, and that can be actionable. I think most people think of sexual harassment as a quid pro quo thing, but hostile work environment has brought out a lot of cases, and it's probably going to bring out more.
And the reality is you could turn this to, relative to minorities, to, any, you can spin it in a variety of different directions. So the hostile work environment policies apply not just to gender-based issues, but race, religion, creed.
Oh, everything. Yeah.
All of those things. So.
Yeah, the thing about that is I've been told that they're extremely difficult to prove.
Yeah.
The club membership's it's not a right, it's a privilege.
Yeah.
It depends where you are too, because there's different attitudes in different parts of the country. I think we all know that, but.
Yeah. Well, we are, I believe, a little bit over the end of the session. I'm happy to stick around for anybody who'd like to chat or have any questions. We only got to 2, which tells me they're either really good or I did a lousy job, one of the 2. But I really appreciate y'all jumping in on this session. I do wish you the best year.
Yeah.
Enjoy your year. Put all your energy into it. It's spectacular.
Hey, Bob.
President of Rotary. Yeah.
Bob, I thought you had mentioned, is there some resources that we could look at for the procedures of how to remove a member? I thought you mentioned that there's some resources.
Well, I think what you need to do first is go to your bylaws and see what, if anything, you have in your bylaws.
Yeah.
And if you don't have anything in your bylaws, then talk to your district legal counsel. They should have something that you put into your bylaws.
So there's nothing that you know of right now in Rotary.
I think it just varies by club and club bylaw.
Yeah, you're supposed to have a club constitution too. And that's where the model stuff that I found out was on page 58, 59 of the manual of procedure from Rotary International, which I downloaded. I know they changed it a fair amount, but I suspect it's probably there. It might be in an appendix. I probably would have killed a couple trees if I printed the whole thing.
Okay.
At the end of the day, your board is your governing body.
Yeah.
So with or without a written procedure, it's,
Right.
it's a board decision. I'd never taken on myself as the president.
No.
to make that kind of decision. It's definitely got to be a group and a board decision. Sometimes you might bring it to the club, but generally I would say it's a board decision rather than a club decision.
Thanks,
Did you
Bob.
write-
This was very helpful.
Yeah. Bob, did you write the hypotheticals for us to look at, or
I lived every single one of those hypotheticals. So
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll tell you is that, I was the investigator in this case, and it kind of goes back to what Kim said. And this individual paid attention to me for a number of years thereafter. It's not and I heard about it in my community that, the things he was saying about me. And so, if you go through this, you need to be prepared for it. It's not necessarily an easy process.
No.
So Bob, inquiring minds want to know what happened in the first scenario with the website.
With the website, the member disclaimed any awareness of it and took it down. It took down that portion of the website. And so as far as I know, the club let him continue because he claimed he really wasn't aware of it, and he took down that portion of the website.
But they wrote a statement, didn't they? Rotary, how did they handle the media? Did someone write a statement?
Yeah, I might have made that part up. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't,
That
I
part
don't
is
remember
very
that.
important. But that part is important
Or the
to
first scenario.
That's
write.
why I included it. That's why I
Yeah.
included it. I don't remember if there was actual media involvement or not.
But
But
the second one, there wasn't any media. You would keep that within the club, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Of course, sometimes you have media that are members of the club.
That's true.
Yeah, I had a case a number of years ago which involved the media, and it was settled. And the first call I got was from that particular media. And there was a gag order. I said, no, I can't talk about it. But I always wonder if they found out anyway. But
it is really important within your own club to have a consistent message. And
Right.
to do that,
Yep.
you need everybody to agree that this is how we're going to do it. This is who's going to talk, and make it a process that you can fall back on. So much of this is about process. Again, when you're in the heat of the moment, these things are really hard. And so you need to fall back on understanding what process you're going to use.
yeah.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys. Great
Bye-bye.
talking to you. Great seeing you.
Okay.